Stop listening to this, finish listening to this great podcast. You wouldn't recognize it because you never listened to it. Alright. See, this is, did you notice this too? You got this little thing there? It's the tracer, like the laser. See over there? Yeah. All right. I forgot my clicker. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. We're going to get started real quick. Like I said, food's on its way. For those of you that don't know, I'm Eric Van Johnson. Show come on Twitter.
I'm Tom Rideout. PFY, ever except for Twitter.
Where he's real Rideout. You want to go?
Sure. The next meetup's coming up. We have SD-PHP presentation downtown on Wednesday, July 13th. Multi-tenant setup with PHP autoloader. And
North County.
The North County presentation.
We got a Postgres guy, maybe, if you want him.
Nope.
No? Okay.
The North County SD-PHP meetup has been recently taken over by me. We're focusing on more advanced topics, things like socket communication and last presentation, non-blocking, asynchronous processing, stuff like that. We're still looking for a presenter for the next meetup. So if you have something interesting to present, or
is July 19th? That's the Tuesday after the Wednesday. Is that still
right? So we're going to be doing the second, third, and fourth Wednesday. The second Wednesday, the third Tuesday, and the fourth Wednesday of next month.
Yeah. Well, we figured out that's not always correct. So basically, second Wednesday and fourth Wednesday are. Second Wednesday is SD-PHP downtown. Fourth Wednesday is this Laravel meetup. Whatever week that is in between, whether it's the second Tuesday or the third Tuesday, that's going to be the North County SD-PHP meetup. So 3 weeks out of the month, you have something PHP to do.
Yep. And like I said, advanced topics. We're looking for something that you're interested in, want to hear about. If there's something that you want to hear about that we don't have a presenter for yet, let me know. We'll find a presenter, do something about it.
This isn't the SD-PHP meetup. Stop pimping your. We didn't talk that long about the town meetup.
No, we didn't.
We did. Next Laravel meetup is going to be Wednesday the 27th. Norm, I saw him. Where's Norm? There he is going to be talking about Quick Start with Forge Spark on AWS. Looking forward to that. So if there's any questions or anything you'd like to see talked about, Norm's the man. Make sure you hit him up before he slips away today.
Trello board. This is where we get our ideas on what to present and who to present it. You can come on here and upvote things and downvote things and add things and let us know what it is you want to hear and see.
Communications, pretty simple.
We have a meetup page at meetup.sdlug.com.
We have Slack. Yes, there's a Slack sign-up page, and then we have Slack with the SD-PHP.
Our IRC channel is freenode.net. Hashtag.
But don't worry about it, because IRC actually bridges into Slack, so you won't miss anything in IRC.
Yep, all you got to do is sign up at one URL and then attend at a completely different URL.
Our Twitter handle is San Diego Laravel. Our website is sdlug.com. Laracon this year is coming up next month. Looking forward to it.
July 27th through 29th.
I know I'm going. Marcus is going. Anybody else going to Laracon this year? Tentative. Did you buy your ticket already? Discount code. Well, let them know they pay for it now. They get a discount. I heard him actually.
It was close, yeah.
Yeah, I heard him start asking if you're not going to attend. If you know you're not going to attend, let them know. I think they're trying to free up seats. So yeah, they are kind of sold out now, but
The same theater, or are they doing it at the
same place.
It's a great place.
Yeah, yeah. If you haven't been to this conference, it's a nice conference. It's a one-track conference, so everybody sits in a big auditorium. Everybody sees the same presentation, and they just go all day long. It's great.
Yeah.
High-quality speakers.
The hotel is like a 10-minute walk away. It's very awesome. It's very nice.
Some quick Laravel news. You want to kick through these?
Sure. Pyrus CMS, which basically hasn't had a real update since 2014, put out a new update today and said, hey, we're announcing version 3. It's built completely on Laravel. It's rebuilt from the ground up, which is great. CMS is our foundation of PHP, so I'm really excited about that. Laravel 5.3 has feature locked and announced the new stuff that's coming. So
they actually announced they're releasing it at Laracon this year. So he's going to hold on to it until Laracon and then release it.
Laravel has turned 5 years old, and the alpha release of PHP 7.1 is out, which has some really interesting, good new features.
That's not feature lock, by the way. I heard a podcast talking to the guy who's managing the release, and they actually don't feature lock until beta. So a release candidate. Yeah. Yeah, that's what they said. I'm telling. So anybody remember? Last month we talked about a feature in 5.3 that was coming out where Laravel was making more use of pusher. What was that feature called? Anybody remember? Echo. That's what it's called. You're right. It did begin with the E. Yeah. Good job. Okay. Some Laravel resources if you're interested. A couple of Laravel podcasts, some blogs, a lot of Twitter handles. This is a good time to mention these slides are up on intro.sdlug.com, so you don't have to copy any of this down. You can go there and review all this. 50 tricks in 50 minutes. We're still doing this. What happened to our podcast?
We're still doing this?
Yeah. Okay. Did you look at this yet?
I did it today.
Yeah, we are. I updated it. You're welcome. You want to do the first one?
Sure. So this is an excellent feature of MySQL that you should never ever use. It's fetching a random row by throwing order by raw rand, and then take, which is limit in
right.
MySQL world. Why should you never do this?
No idea. Why should you never do this?
Really?
Yeah, why?
No.
I mean, I can see potential use cases.
No, incorrect.
Actually, that's a great question, though.
No. That's
Yeah.
not what it does. Rand,
That's a good question.
Rand removes all indexing from your table, fetches every single row, and then out of the selected rows, randomly chooses from the list that is returned.
Oh.
So not only do you lose all indexing on your columns, not only do you lose all your indexing, but you're also writing to a temp table a list of every ID for every record. So never, ever, ever use Rand. That's not a good one to use. You're right. We're totally ready for this.
What, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought when I saw it.
Is it because it had my signature on it?
UUID model primary key. So actually, Thomas, you should probably talk about this because you did something real similar to this, didn't you?
Literally, that's my code.
Is this really your code?
Yeah.
Well, he did it before you did.
Yeah, but then I did it again.
So explain it.
So models throw different events for different behaviors, creating, updating, saving, saved, deleted, deleting, stuff like that. If you want to use UUIDs for your auto-increment columns, then it's pretty simple to have your models handle that by creating a trait for your models. Your trait basically says, Where's the laser pointer?
The
The little laser.
right
There we go.
Yeah.
So the way it works is basically says when your model is loading, then register these events. First off is all the parents' events. Second off is the new events you want to create. So when the model starts the creating behavior, then perform these actions. Get the key name for the model, so find out what column it's keyed on. If it's empty, then generate a new random ID out of this UUID library and pop it into the column where that key belongs. And then the generate UUID method here is just a package from the Ramsey library.
It's actually included up here, yeah.
Yeah, it's really simple, and it lets you modify data on the saving method so that when you create new stuff, it hands back to you with the ID that you expect it to have.
Thomas just did a lot of work on UUIDs with the project he's working on, so he's a good guy to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah, these are big int unsigned, so they have a maximum 16.5, or no, I'm sorry, they have a maximum 1256 character length.
And even numbers are usually more accurate than odd numbers.
Fucking crimes. No, it's using the public function generate new UUID method that I've defined. No, it's provided by the code on the screen.
Right, yeah.
I was saying that the UUID. Hey, if you've really enjoyed this banter, there's a whole lot more of it. Because that's a different.
So John, myself, and Thomas, we sit down I have really no good explanation to why we do it, but for about an hour a week, we sit there and yell at each other about how each other is wrong on a lot of things we're doing. We also talk about our meetups a lot. Upcoming meetups, presenters, previous meetups. We talk about projects we're working on. We talk about things in the PHP community. If you do podcasts, if it interests you at all, we try to stay pretty local as far as our discussion, so you'll hear a lot of names dropped of people you should probably know. There's a podcast out there for you. We're on iTunes, we're on Google Music, SoundCloud.
You got your Erics, you got your Fox Pro Erics.
I want John to notice that we...
I was noticing.
You just see that? Okay. We finally made you an official host.
Just never been a problem.
Real quick, we want to thank our sponsors. CARI.net is the location you're at right now. They provide the food, the location, the stream, all that stuff. Please be considerate when we finish up our meetup. Make sure you pick up after yourself, all your beer bottles, all your food and all that. Make sure you clean up after yourself. We'd appreciate that. DAWithDev.com, that's John and I's little company that we run.
They provide shirts.
We have a lot of our developers are here. We do the beer and the website and all this other stuff. So that's all there. Yep. No, it's okay. Clap. Clap. Hey, most of you guys clap. All right. What's that?
We accept shirts.
We accept checks.
Shirts.
Shirts? Oh,
Throw him a shirt.
he did, didn't he?
I did not say provide.
We will take it out of his next paycheck. All right.
It's on an employment-oriented basis.
So, food did show up. Let's go ahead. Who's going first? You or Spencer?
Me.
You? Okay. While Thomas gets set up, grab some food. Real quick, facilities are down the hall for the males to the right. Females are to the right too? Yeah. Males and females are up there. Yeah.
Technically, the whole place you're in is a facility, so if you're looking for the restrooms, they're over there as well.
No, Jesus. This is why I don't like working.
Why are you unplugging? I need a laptop.
Oh, you want to use my laptop?
Yes.
Sure, it's fine that you use my laptop. Thanks for asking.
Where's the clicker?
I didn't plug it in because I didn't
For
really
more
do
of
it.
this wonderful banter.
Please, go get your food.
PHP
Apparently we
English.
have some setup to do. Take a bio break. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. Oh, did you share it with me?
No.
You didn't share it with
No,
me?
I didn't. Are you guys?
Yeah, we're streaming now. Yeah. You're on camera. Turn around and wave. Don't leave.
I shared the link to the. Oh no, it's public. So.
Oh, what good does that do
I
me?
have no idea.
Oh, here, I'll open up an
I shared the link on
incognito.
Slack, didn't I?
Did you?
I thought I did.
Where at? General or SDPHP?
General.
General? No, I don't think you did, bud. Is it?
No,
Let's put
keep
it.
going. That's today. This would have been last night,
Oh, last night.
or 2 days ago.
Oh, dude, come on, really? Just go share it with me real quick. Diego Dev. That way it'll just pop up if you do that. Huh? Jeez. Can't I open this and get all the links? Killing me, Smalls. This is it? There you go. All right, you want the clicker? Yeah, I got it. I just didn't put it on.
Missed you, Aaron. Yep. Every shot so far. So, we're going to cover something that Laravel has sort of been beaten around for a few times. And something that's always sort of come off as a little mystifying to me, which is why I particularly wanted to tackle this. And this is service providers. So, in the example here, we're going to look at the creation of a shopping cart service provider. Something that's really just whatever you can imagine a shopping cart providing for a user. If you were going to get a package from Packagist, and include it and say, start using this as a shopping cart system, that's what this theoretical system is going to provide for you. So we're going to create the foundation for that system. How do you write code that someone can pull in, interact with, and use as a sort of a native Laravel application? So the first thing is we have to look at the IOC container. IOC is the inversion of control container. It lets you say request, and gets auto-populated with the request object from the container that you're living in. So every application in Laravel lives within the application context. So when you're calling something, it can use IOC to say, are you trying to do something that is reflected, something that is IOC oriented? There's a few other ways of calling on the IOC container that you're currently in. App make auth, or the app helper method make, Q in this case, or / cookie get name, so that'll give you an IOC resolution with the facade, the cookie facade. So what you're calling there is a non-static object as if it were static. And then simple stuff like new file system. All of these will return the expected results, and all of them will do really essentially the same thing. So what we want to do is we want to create the facade for our shopping cart system. Something that is the easiest way to access in Laravel, in the Laravel world. So we start with our service object. Our service is the shopping cart, and this is really all there is to it. We give it the proper namespace, just throw it in the services directory, give it the app services namespace, and then fill it full of all the methods that we want to be available publicly. That's it. Your object doesn't have to extend anything, implement anything, use anything. Your object is whatever the heck you want it to be. The rest of it is all constructed specifically for Laravel. So we'll look at the service provider object here. Now, in this instance, you'll see I've moved it to a shopping cart directory. This is advised for when you're developing a collection of packages or a collection of files that all relate to each other. So the shopping cart service, if I wanted to access it just as a new object, that's fine having it in just services. But if I want to have a facade and a service provider for it, then it's recommended to move it into its own directory. So we've moved it into its own directory, and we're extending the service provider library from Laravel. Now there's two main functions we have to worry about. The first one, the most important one, is the register method here. So when Laravel app boots up, it reads through all your service providers and calls the register method on all your service providers one at a time. This just says when someone wants the shopping cart object, you either return a singleton to them, so you make it one time and feed the same object back to them over and over again, or you have an instance where you generate that object in some way of your own, and the generation is that generated object is sent to them, or you bind a method to instantiate the object every time. So a service provider can provide the same object, a new object, or a constructed per instance object.
So that one's still providing the singleton. You were showing comments.
Yeah, it's commented out to show you the options. But singleton is really the way that it's done in Laravel, to say, don't make this until I need it, but once I need it, make it the same one every time, point to the same object every time. So if I modify the session object, then when another class calls the session object, it's the same one and it's already the modified state. You'll notice here that I'm passing app into my closure. That just means that my service provider can call other service providers to be registered at the same time. So if my service provider registers another service provider, I have the app instance to pass into it. This is for more complex projects, and there's no harm in including it without using it, but there is harm in not including it, so might as well do it. Bind is the same thing, except that every call is a new instance.
Hey, Thomas, for the streaming, could you make sure you repeat questions? Thank you.
For the streaming, I can repeat the questions.
So it's the statement. Thank you.
You'll see. Did I brush over that, or did that answer that? Instance is you have an object acquired from somewhere and you pass it into instance. So you can use all sorts of different factory methods, whatever you want. It's not just a closure. Singleton has the closure attached to it, so you can pass in all the behaviors in the closure. And bind is do this every time and hand a new object every time. The boot method occurs after all of the register methods have been called for all of your service providers. So you have a list of service providers that's got maybe 20 items in it. That list is run over once, and register is called every time for each one of those. And then it's run over again, and boot is called for every one of those. Now the reason to that is this, is that if I were to include my shopping cart service provider before the view service provider had been registered, then when I tried to set a view composer for this service provider, it would say there's no such thing. This hasn't been registered yet. So the service providers get run twice over so that you can register everything and make sure everything's registered first, which should just be this. It should just be a very small code snippet. And then everything that your service provider relies on should be done in the boot method. So it should be done expecting every other service provider to have been instantiated and loaded. In this case, we're just attaching a very simple view composer that does nothing. That's fine, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So does that make sense as a single file? So right now you have a directory structure that is shoppingcart.php, shoppingcartserviceprovider.php, and that's it. Now we want the facade. So facades are not Laravel specific, but as far as a framework goes, it's the only framework that really leverages them. And they're sneakily simple. In this case, you can see the facade is just namespaced the same as everything else. It's named shopping cart facade, and it extends the facade class. And then the only function is get facade accessor, and the only thing that does is return the class response for the shopping cart object. It seems like it's way too simple for what it's doing, but that's because so much work is being done in the parent object. So one really, really tricky, important key element is that place where you were defining the name of your singleton, you were saying this is the name of it and this is the contents of it. This absolutely has to be the same in these two locations. This is the way that those things are bound together. If you've named it with uppercase or lowercase or whatever, if you're calling it based off of its complete class name, or if you're whatever you name it, this is a unique system-wide name that you have to give it. This will cause the most problems for creating this setup. And this setup, which the first time you do it takes an hour, the second time you do it takes 5 minutes. And you should really strive to do this more often. Strive to have things fully integrated instead of partially integrated.
Well, this facade definition is in separate files, or does Laravel have a bunch of them?
This is in a separate file. This is in the app services shopping cart facade file. So we'll see that here after this. Inside the facade. So in the way that the facade here is deceptively simple, the way that the facades actually work is actually simple, as long as you understand the core concept behind it. So, call static. Is everyone familiar with what this method does? Is anyone not familiar with what this does? So, if you statically call a method of an object that does not exist, this gets called instead. And it's just what the name of the method was and what the arguments provided for it were. So, since your facade only has one method, get facade accessor, then any other method you call is going to hit this. First thing it does is try to get the instance of the actual class that you want, because we don't want to call your actual class statically. We want to call it based off of its instance. If there's no instance and we can't get the root, get the facade accessor, then throw an error. Otherwise, we will get an instance of the object from get facade root. And then we count how many arguments there are, and then call the method that we defined based off of the number of arguments we had. The $ method there allows you to dynamically name a method that you're calling on an object. It's an unusual thing to see in PHP, but it's really, really simple. If the value of method were void, then it would call instance void as a method. If it were get item, then it would call instance get item. So it's a simple concept, it's just rare. And then all of the arguments, I'm not sure why we stop at 4 and then call it as an array instead, but I didn't write this.
Do you know what that at all?
I have no idea.
It's okay. If you look at the performance reasons, calling as a function array is actually extremely slow. So the most common case is that requirements you find that most often that
So limit your service provider to 4 arguments per method. That's a good lesson to learn. So that's all there is to a facade. There's a million other methods that are related to doing this resolving, but really all it's doing is saying, hey, get an object version of what he's asking for instead of just a class version, and call the method that he's asking for, and that's it. There's not a whole lot of trickery, magic, black box stuff going on in here. Facades get a lot of crap from the community at OWL, but they don't do a whole lot that's magic. It's completely different arguments that give facades hell.
it's all just straight.
Yeah. It's just how you like to see your code formatted. And in the case of downloading a library and using it, facades are way easier than saying new, singleton, or calling the IOC and making sure that the IOC is in the scope that you're working in. It's nice to have the facades. So, get facade root. That first method we're calling there, all it does is say resolve facade instance. Get facade accessor. Facade accessor is the one method that we have in our facade. So it just says, make an instance if we don't have an instance out of the thing that's being asked for. This is the entirety of how facades work in Laravel. Three methods, which could be 2. So now you have your general structure. You've created your package. It's a directory with three things in it: your service provider, and your facade. Now you just got to hop into your config. In your config, you drop in the service provider under the providers array, and you drop in the alias for your facade under the aliases array. This tells Laravel, load the service provider. That means that the service is now available to IOC. And then it tells Laravel, okay, load the facade. So now the facade is available, globally scoped on the root namespace of your application. That's all it does. If you drop the facade out, instantiating your object via the service provider is just as easy. It's the first slide we used. There's 4 other ways of instantiating your service without using a facade. Your facade just does 1/10 of a step for you. But it makes it easier if you're going to publish a library to somebody. So now in our sample controller here, /shopping cart test calls the test method of the shopping cart object, which was instantiated during the boot process. Now, there's a thing called a deferred boot, which means that I don't want this object to be made until I call it. But that's in an instance where you know that something is going to be a heavy load object just loading it up, and you don't want to call it unless you have specific needs to. You can also put dependencies on loading up a service provider. So you can say this service provider gets loaded when this service provider calls for this, and it gets crazy. You can optimize a lot in your service provider, but you don't need to for this instance. The one thing about this is that your IDE doesn't necessarily know how to read facades and service providers. There is a package called IDE helper, and you do have to run that and get it to generate a new IDE helper for at least PHP Storm, so that it knows that the methods that the facade is extending are available to the static object. Blade templates. This is something that I believed was complex, but it's not. If you want to include a blade template for your shopping cart, something that just says here's your current price and it's styled in dollars or lira or pounds, simply in your shopping cart directory, create a views directory and drop your blade template in there. And then in your boot method, you say load views from, and then the directory where the views are located, and once again, the name of your facade as you define in your alias. Now, if I call shopping cart :cart, then it will call the cart view. It will call it in place. I don't have to move anything out of my library into a publicly accessible area or into the resources directory. It's just called in place. This is useful if the template's not supposed to be edited or managed in any way, but there are situations where you want the user to be able to change, modify that blade template. Your question? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand.
Yeah, I guess I got a lot.
So configuration file is an example where you do need somebody to change something. So same deal. Create the config directory, create your config file. And then, instead of just loads views from, you say this publishes. You give it the directory for the file you want to publish and where you want to publish it to. In this case, config path is a predefined internal helper function for Laravel. It just resolves to where the config files of the system are stored. Once the system boots, then publishes is saved, and if the user calls the vendor publish method in Artisan, you'll get this response. It'll say copy the file from shopping cart config shopping cart PHP to config shopping cart PHP, and then in this case Laravel IDE helper, because I don't know why this isn't part of Laravel, but it absolutely should be. That's it. So now you've got a file that you've published to your endpoints project. That's it. It's the first time you do this, debugging it, dealing with it, takes an hour, hour and a half. Why am I creating this stupid facade file? It doesn't matter. Okay, but immediately after writing up all the files needed for this presentation, I went back to work and had to do this for actual work. And I was able to create all the necessary components in 5 minutes. And if I needed to publish a config file, make the directory, create the file, go in, write this publish dir directory to location. Like, once you've done it the first time, this stuff is so simple, it is a 5-minute process. It will save you time in the long run. It's absolutely a time saver. Questions?
Does it check to see if the file is already and it doesn't overwrite?
Yes.
So once it does, that's
Yes.
Haven't repeated one question. Just pointing that out. Go ahead, John. Ask another question. You won't
If a user calls the artisan publish command twice, it will not overwrite existing files.
Everybody's afraid to ask a question now, huh?
Yeah, because you yelled at them.
I've been a whisperer.
Is there ever a time when you don't want to create a service?
I always create services.
I did not hear that. I did not hear that question. What was the question, Thomas?
The question was, is there ever a time where you don't want to create a service provider? I always create a service provider. I always create a service. When you can logically take something out of a controller and say this is a behavior I'm performing, then you have a name for a service. So use that name. When you can name something, get it the hell out of a controller. Controllers I use for validation of this page, validation of this page, validation of the next page, returning the contents. When it gets to something where I say establish value or check quality, add to cart, you're giving a name to something, and if you've given it a name, it shouldn't be in a controller. It should be in a service. And you should sit and think out which services you should have versus which ones you do have, and try to abstract as much as possible. Which, it is a pain in the ass to abstract as much as possible the first couple times. But once you've done it, you'll find yourself not repeating code that you normally would just be copying and pasting, and it'd be taking up just as much time, but now you'd have copy and pasted code. It's a matter of comfort, and you have to get out of the comfort zone of doing everything in the controller, doing everything in the model, and move it into, oh, this is how you do it. And it takes 5 minutes to create the whole framework for it and test it, and then once you've done that, you can call everything as a facade. You can also publish it as a separate package, and so I can use it in my other project here, and it takes maybe 2 times of doing this to be 100% comfortable with doing it. And being able, I mean, at this point I've done it twice. I could do it again in 1 minute. I could sit down and just type out all the commands in a single command and on a single terminal, do it in Vim in 1 minute. Because it's really, really easy. You just have to know how to do it the first time, and then the second time, and then the third time you already know. Any more questions?
Okay, we'll take about 5 minutes. My Spencer and Thomas switch out, so we'll go to the library and grab more food. Get down to it.
Yeah. Clicker dongle.
just let me know if you need me.
Nice. Nice. Thomas go? Not gonna hang out? You ready? Alright guys, let's do this. Hi everyone, I'm Spencer Pointkowski. I'm a PHP developer, troubleshooter, general bug fixer. Today I'm gonna show you why John and Eric shouldn't let me contract for them anymore. No, I'm kidding. Today I'm gonna present about Laravel Auth on your legacy code base. Why on earth would you want to do this? So the prerequisite to this is you have to have previously bolted Laravel onto your legacy code base. John gave a talk about this back. Why is the screen flickering? Is it me? Hopefully that won't mess things up too much. So John gave a talk back in November about bolting Laravel onto your legacy code base. You suppose you have legacy code that you want to upgrade. You want to do it slowly over time, maybe not do a complete rewrite. You just kind of want to move modules over one at a time as you have time. That might be, so this might be something that you want to do. The prerequisite is you have to have installed Laravel somewhere outside your legacy web root, move the index.php file from Laravel's public directory into your web root directory, rename it something like laravel.php, and then modify your web server to fall back to this if it can't find whatever file you're looking for. So say you need to find index.php, that's an actual file that it's going to process and serve. If it can't find that, fall back to laravel.php and run it through the entire Laravel stack. I recently did this for a project that I work on. It's in various stages of testing, like test it, oh no, now we have other priorities, let's not test this. Let's put this off to the side for a little bit. Oh, let's pick it back up. So I guess it's currently being tested, but I can't show you that code base. So instead I decided to bolt on Laravel as a demo, just kind of like a demo. I decided to bolt on Laravel to a legacy app that everyone knows, WordPress. This is just for demonstration purposes. I don't suppose you would ever want to do this in the real world. I just needed something that everyone is kind of familiar with as a demonstration. Okay, so you've bolted onto your legacy code. Boy, this doesn't look that great. But you can see here that I have my project, it's legacy. I have two folders, the old and busted code base, that's WordPress here, and there's the whole WordPress directory with all the files that you know, and then new hotness is going to be Laravel. Here's the laravel.php file that I mentioned. That is actually that's Laravel's index file from the public directory, just stuck right in there. So when you do this, though, the problem that I saw immediately was authentication between the two systems. So say you log into WordPress, and then you want to go to a route in Laravel, you will get immediately redirected to a login page. I mean, assuming it's a protected route, you'll get redirected to Laravel's login page, and that's no good. You need to be able to, you want to be able to move kind of seamlessly between the two systems. So in the example here, what I'm going to do is move the options-general.php from WordPress, from the WordPress admin, into Laravel. So you have your legacy login page. Now that looks bad. Maybe I'm going to try disconnecting, reconnecting. Searching. Doesn't look that great. I'm just going to roll with it. So everybody knows this page, and you can log in okay. So now let's define our new protected route. We're going to use the auth middleware. I'm going to say the group is WP admin, so it'll look very similar to WordPress. The route is going to be options. But as soon as you do that, as soon as you hit in WP admin/options, it's going to load up Laravel, and Laravel is going to say, you're not logged in, redirect you to the login page. And that's not very good. So what do you do? So I wanted to get up and running pretty quickly. I didn't want to have to rewrite everything, all of my existing login logic in the old code base. I didn't want to rewrite all of that just yet. I just kind of wanted to get up and running. So in order to do this, I've leveraged the existing authentication functions and methods that are already available. So first thing I need to do, though, is I need to override that authenticates users trait. You stick this little function in your auth controller. That's not good. makes me sad. What's that?
You didn't share your copy,
No. No. Is it my computer? My computer doesn't do this for me at home. It's very sad. I know, but I figured it would work. No, I don't. I use the Thunderbolt. Okay, so this method is in the authenticates users trait, which is pulled in via the authenticates and registers users trait, which is then used in the auth controller. This is the auth controller that ships with Laravel straight out of the box. So just add this method right into a show login form. This will redirect you to WP admin. Why WP admin? Again, I'm going to leverage the existing authentication functions. So if I need to log in, show me WordPress's login screen. So now when we do that, we're looking better because I go to WP options or WP admin/options. It redirects me to WordPress's login, which says I'm already logged in, so just send me right back to the main homepage. Okay, that's all good. You with me so far? Everyone falling asleep? Everyone saying I would never do this? This is terrible. This is stupid. Why are you presenting on this? Well, if you thought this was dumb so far, just wait. It's about to get even worse because this is where the real dirtiness begins. In Laravel's autoloader, in order to leverage those existing functions, do I see you say, "Oh Christ, Frank"? Oh, of course. So what we need to do is we need to load your app into Laravel. For WordPress, that's grabbing the wp-loader.php and the version. This demo actually took me a long time to put together. There's a ton of global variables and other stuff that's just kind of scattered all over the place that, well, this took me a while to do. So we just require one so we don't get any other errors. But you'll notice that in the autoload.php, I've taken out the composer autoload function. So where have I put that? I stuck that in wp-config. So now Laravel is aware of WordPress, and WordPress is also aware of Laravel and all of its functions. Every package you install in Laravel will be pulled into WordPress. Maybe you need to bolt on a quick feature. You just want to do one quick line in your legacy code base. You found a package for that. You install it into Laravel. You can use it right in your legacy code. Next, I need to set up the auth service provider. I'm going to make two files, one for the guard and one for the user provider, and I'm going to go completely against Thomas's advice that he just gave in the presentation, and I'm going to save them all into the app providers directory. I'm not going to make them. I did not make them into their own directory. I didn't separate anything out. I just kind of dumped everything into the regular or the app provider directory, and I used the existing auth service provider. So what you need to do is we need to create a new auth driver. So I'm going to make a WordPress auth driver, and in order to do that, you need to have some in the guard and the user provider. So to set up the user provider, it was pretty easy. I just extended the regular Eloquent user provider. When I get around later in the presentation to making the user model, my user model, since I'm bolting this onto a legacy code base, I'm going to keep the legacy database schema, so my model retrieves the WordPress WP users table. So, so that is my user model. Laravel is already all of this config is already written to find app model user as your user model. So I can just extend the Eloquent user provider and use all of the methods that are in there. Nothing to modify so far. Where's your heckling? I was looking forward to you said you were going to heckle. Oh, thank you. When the next slide comes up, when my slides come back, so we're injecting the user provider into the guard, and when they come back, you'll see a screenshot of the guard. I wrote presenter's notes. I'm in presenter view, and that's why I need it this way. So so now we have our guard. This is the user provider that I just showed you. It's just being injected. Oh, I guess one other thing I forgot to mention. Here, the user provider, the element user provider requires that you pass in the hash method and the actual user model as a string. Like, what user model do you want? So I did that there. Oh, and it needs the session interface as well. So, oh wait, no, that's in the guard. Okay, yeah, these two are in the user provider, and then you need this and this in the guard. So my user provider and my session. So you need to pass in the guard's name. This is WP, and the only method that I've needed to override is the user method. Everything else, and this is like from the auth facade when you do auth check, auth user, auth ID, auth anything. All of those methods you can use as is. At least that's what I found so far in bolting on to the legacy code base for my project and for doing this demo. As I get more into it, there may be some things that go wacky, and I may need to update this presentation. But for now, just for a little demo, this is all I needed to do was modify the user method to return or to retrieve the user that is logged in. And this is the first bit of, actually this is where you would use your legacy auth function. So in WordPress, it's the WP validate auth cookie function that actually checks, are you indeed logged in? If you are, I will return the user ID that is currently logged into the browser. Great, grab that in your user ID, and then you can use the existing user provider and all those great methods with the user ID, and Laravel will just pull it right out of the database for you. Any questions so far? I feel like I'm going really fast. The guard takes the user provider as the first argument.
What does the guard do?
Guard is what the guard is basically like that auth facade. Auth user, auth login, auth logout. That calls guard. And the provider is the user. Well, the provider. Yeah. And then the last thing we need to do is add the driver in config/auth. This is where it is. It's under guards web, and then you just tell it what driver. Since we extended it and made a new auth driver called the WP, that was back here. Auth extend WP. So you drop it right there. And then last but not least, you need to actually make your user model. So for WordPress, obviously modify this for your own code base, but for WordPress, the table, you need to override the table variable because it doesn't conform to Laravel's convention. You need WP users by default, and then the primary key is uppercase ID. I also made a couple other methods for the user meta and the post, but yeah, that's most of the setup. And then you start kind of moving stuff over. So from here, I actually have a little demo. So lucky me, I can put this into mirror mode. I know, I can put this into mirror mode, and hopefully this will work. Huh? Searching? Come on. I like that. Okay, so I set up you saw in my routes.php file. What? Just making it nice and big. So I just called it make an options controller, show all options, show options page. So in the directory structure, I just dropped it into admin. I made an admin controller that will, it'll be extended by all the different pages that you might want to make. So admin, when you're in WP admin, all the admin pages can be extended here. This was something that took me a while to figure out. I had to drop in I had to require the wp-admin/admin php bootstrap file. I had to require this bootstrap file because there's a whole lot of global variables that are defined in all of the different files that are pulled in. Yeah, absolutely. It took me, this was one of the things that took me a while to figure out. But it had to be dropped in here, because if it was dropped in any other part of the code base, I'm trying to think of what happened. It just, those global variables would be written to null, and it just wouldn't, just didn't work. So then in the options controller, this is pretty sparse. I'm just returning a view. Why did I do this? Well, I had to do this quickly for the demo. I was running out of time. I'm sorry. I wish I could have made this look a lot nicer, but again, this is like bolting it onto your legacy code base. So basically what I did was, WordPress has everything in the view file, basically, right? Options-general.php's got all that logic and the view. Everything's just written right there. So, why not I just drop it right in there? Literally, just drop it right in there. I did extend this is the blade file. I did extend an admin wrapper, but otherwise the rest of this code is straight out of the options-general.php file. In all its glory. There it is. Two files I did pull out, two includes I did pull out, so that it could be, so you could reuse this on all your other options pages. Was most of the admin pages had admin header and admin footer somewhere in there. So I just extracted those out and stuck them in a template file. Why did I put menu up here? Oh, this was one of the things. This was actually a gotcha. This was another gotcha that I had to do. I added this line. This is not in the WordPress core. It just starts right here. So later on in the file, or later on as Laravel's going through, it would try to pull up the global menu, and it would say null, undefined. Just wouldn't work. It was keeping everything in. So this, when this file gets pulled in, I don't know if you saw, it's actually getting pulled in this scope here, or in this namespace. So since they didn't define it as global, it was just defined in this namespace. So when later on in the template file, when it calls global menu, it goes, oh no, that global variable hasn't been defined yet. Sorry, I'm using WordPress in a way that it wasn't designed for, obviously, but that was one of the gotchas. I just mentioned that as like if you do this to your legacy code base, there may be some gotchas that you need to figure out in your code base. This was one for doing it for this demo. So once I just defined these at the top of the file as global, then later on they just magically pulled up and appeared. So yeah, that's about it. Nothing to it, right? So just a few things that you gotta fix. So okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road. If I did this right, then if I go to the settings general page, which is going to try to pull up options general with, and this one other thing. So I ripped everything out of there. So this is like where the rubber meets the road. If I didn't do this right, I'm going to get an error and be embarrassed. So this is going to redirect us. So I pull in the bootstrap file just so I can get access to these two functions, and it's going to redirect me to that route that I defined, wp-admin/options. So if I didn't do this right, I'm going to get an error. Yeah, uh-oh. This is where the rubber meets the road. The suspense is killing me. Of course. Waiting. I literally clicked it when I was going to go ta-da, and then no. Yeah, go ahead. The question was, why isn't my nickname an IRC suspenser? Never came up before. Yes, yes. Before we release the suspense and the tension.
Upgrade WordPress? Because you seem to have copied some stuff around. I'm just curious, like when the new 4.4 whatever comes out, and they say there's a security problem.
What would it take to upgrade?
Because you're not going to be able to click upgrade, right?
What's that? What? Yeah. What would it take? So I guess continuing the demo to its conclusion, what would it take to upgrade WordPress? I guess pull the entirety of WordPress into Laravel.
Well, yeah, to whatever it would take to, your new hotness and
I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on. So yeah, what would it take to pull everything out of the old and into the new?
Whatever you change, it's like you copied some stuff.
I mean, you saw the well, well again. So this is like how right do you want to do this? God damn it. So the general.blade.php file, I mean, this is literally 387 lines copied straight out of the options-general.php file. So this was literally a cut and dump. If you just want to get it into Laravel and say, I'll fix it later, famous last words, then you could copy and paste it in maybe a few days or a week. But I mean, then, I don't know. It's like, you have all these functions, add off, add actions, multi-site, guide, current user count. It's just so much that.
I think you may be going down the response because I don't understand. What he's asking is if a new version of WordPress comes out, what's going to happen before changes?
Okay. So that was okay. So if a new version of WordPress comes out, what happens to all these changes I'm making? That there, I need to reiterate, this was just for demonstration purposes. An extreme case for demonstration purposes, I would personally never do this because WordPress is continually being updated. WordPress right now is a stand-in for your legacy code base that you maintain, that you will release updates for, that you control. Yeah, right. Like, I had to modify that, that menu file. That I had to modify that core WordPress file to get this to work. Obviously, an update would override all that and probably fail spectacularly. If you took WordPress as it is now and say, I'm never going to use the automatic updates in the future, then you could just move forward and not have to worry about it. But yeah, like I said, this is a stand-in for your legacy code base that you maintain and you update.
So you chose, for your example, the worst case scenario.
Suppose I did. The question was for the internet in case there are any WordPress core maintainers out there watching. The question from just a general audience member and nobody in particular. So I chose the worst case example as my demo. I guess yes I did.
So as you said, this started with a presentation I gave about upgrading a legacy code base to Laravel.
And before it goes out real quick, there's the general thing. Click. Oh, it worked. Yeah, it worked. And down here it says loaded via Laravel. So, and you can just move seamlessly in and out and back to themes.php, and then you can just now move seamlessly between Laravel and your legacy code base, or your users can once they're logged in. It just so happens that when this is saved, this will actually work because it calls a completely different file that I didn't mess with, and then we'll redirect me back, so that worked. Now the default is author. So with very little changes, just some cut and dump, now you're able to log in with Laravel. I suppose why auth? Why this now? Because authentication is such a central part of pretty much every web application. Basically, if you're building a web app, you need your users to log in. You need to authenticate your users, know who this user is. It's so important that authentication, an entire authentication package ships with Laravel out of the box. I think it's like the only package where they drop, controllers and routes, and I believe that's the only package package where they did that because it's so important that they included defaults for you. So in that same token, that's why I did this first. So
No, just say what you really meant. I failed to present this last time I promised. I didn't bring up the other.
Well, it's been on the podcast.
the question for the internet was,
One time.
John says that what I really meant to say in all of this was that since John failed to bring any of this up in his talk, I figure I would pick up his slack. And the answer to that statement is yes. You're absolutely right.